This would represent a substantial setback for Pingchen. Dr. Liu voices her apprehension regarding the perils lurking within the ancient remains. Legends say the elemental entities overcome their adversaries. However, victory without eliminating them is uncertain. Shu, who becomes apprehensive if the Tamar's strength falters. Considering this the worst-case scenario isn't just risky, it's possibly lethal. Liu provides him with a website address and an invitation. A QR code offers price reductions and bonuses on cultivation supplies. She aims to encourage him to utilize the available provisions. She emphasizes that these assets will facilitate his rapid advancement. He'll quickly become an expert tamer, she assures. Liu recommends Shu, who temporarily disregard the Ice Dragon ruins. He should concentrate solely on the uncharted realm. Ironically, she seems to be the one consistently mentioning them. The latest addition to Department 11 begins to perceive the mission as excessively perilous. He conveniently overlooks that it's a component of the evaluation. It determines official membership within the group. His primary objective within the ruins is to unveil Glacier City's hidden past. Liu assures him complete exploration isn't necessary for success. His auditory perception will be instrumental in achieving this goal. Thus, Jian Cheng was compelled to act. Abruptly, the skeletal figure's arm enveloped the young woman. It hoisted her into the air. A gasp of astonishment escaped her lips, perched upon the skeleton's shoulder as it transported her. The girl's cries echoed, demanding her release. She questioned its defiance of her commands. Her protests included the abandonment of valuable resources. Disregarding the girl's frantic pleas, Jiancheng pondered his status as a reborn soul. He felt obligated. He had to exploit his knowledge of the game's intricate mechanics. This would grant him an advantage over his rivals. He aimed to be the first to vanquish concealed adversaries. He also sought to acquire pristine artifacts within the game. Jian Cheng believed he could claim them all. Exuding assurance, he boldly proclaimed, "My resolve is firm. We commence our journey there." The armored warrior intercepted the shield's blow. Were unable to withstand the creature's onslaught. Fallen players littered the ground. The perpetrator lurked behind them. Concealed by shadows, he remained unseen. Yet his immense, imposing figure and crimson eyes were inherently menacing. Despite the potential hazards, Jian Cheng resolved to proceed. The concealed dungeon lay within the novice zone's vicinity. It was situated near the starting area. A massive black bear, with glowing red eyes and a thorny hide, seized the recently slain knight in its jaws. This location was known as the Savage Bear's Den. Let's examine our young heroine's attributes. Her in-game moniker is Adorable Simpleton. Currently level 3, she hasn't yet chosen a specialization. As one might surmise, her vocation is Necromancer. Her health pool is 500, mana is 520, attack 90. Magic power, 121. She wields a beginner necromancer staff. Her abilities are limited to conjuring undead creatures of the lowest rank. The player's overall fighting prowess is measured at 66. Quite formidable for a novice. In my humble opinion, amidst the ferocious bear's mountain lair, a piercing, frantic shriek echoed. A man clinging to a tree branch bellowed in rage, demanding to know who had attracted all the beasts. They were encircling them menacingly. His companion urged them to flee, as their commander had perished. He hastily retreated, abandoning his fellow fighters. The injured man, clad in iron armor, felt a surge of panic and pleaded to be waited for. He implored not to be left behind. The bear, responsible for the entire ordeal, unleashed a thunderous, furious roar. Now isolated with the colossal bear, which reared onto its hind legs, glaring at him fiercely. The wounded man shrieked in terror, refusing to accept death. Since his entire gear, every piece of equipment he'd invested his savings in, was there. Suddenly, he sensed a presence lurking behind him. A glimmer of hope ignited within him. He assumed his companions had returned to rescue him. Whirling around swiftly, he exclaimed joyfully, certain they had come back, but his words abruptly ceased. His eyes widened in sheer terror at the sight of the being behind him, and, looming behind it, a skeletal figure. Emanating a chilling aura, it carried a girl upon its shoulder. She appeared oblivious to the unfolding events. In a heartbeat, the terrified man, tears streaming down his face, shrieked that it was a specter. Startled by the man's cry, the girl began screaming again, begging to be released. A notification abruptly appeared. The player was afflicted with a bleeding effect. Immediately followed by another, he was dead. Right before the couple's horrified gaze, he disintegrated into fragments. Witnessing this, Jiancheng smirked, remarking that a simple hemorrhage had proved fatal. The bear, observing the duo from the periphery, unleashed a deafening roar. It obliterated trees and everything in its trajectory, charging towards them. A level 7 ferocious claw bear stood before them. Perceiving the imminent threat, the girl exclaimed in terror, "I warned you about the dangers here. We must flee immediately," she added. Quickly, clutching Jiancheng's head, she frantically cried, "I can't perish here. I'll lose all my gathered resources." Disregarding the girl, Jiancheng evaluated the circumstances. Fortune favors me, he thought, observing the numerous fallen players scattered about. No one could impede him, although more bears lurked within the tree's shadows. Jiancheng felt immense gratitude towards those who had amassed them in a single location. The objective extended beyond mere elimination. A concealed requirement also existed. Meeting this prerequisite allowed the player to invoke a hidden adversary. He recklessly flung the girl to the earth. Her cry of pain echoed. The protagonist averted his gaze. She indignantly questioned his defiance. She reiterated her status as his superior. She reminded him of her dominion over him. However, upon surveying her surroundings, panic seized her as she realized they were encircled. This development, however, was advantageous for Jiancheng. It was precisely what his scheme required. The bears materialized from the gloom. They growled menacingly, their eyes fixed on the pair with ravenous intent. As the girl's awareness returned, she grasped the dire nature of their predicament. Through tears, she implored the skeleton to depart. She pleaded with him to leave their presence. The skeletal figure before her vanished abruptly. This immediately caught her eye. Jiancheng, brandishing his blade, swiftly charged toward the bear. The beast retaliated, its massive jaws agape in a menacing roar. Witnessing this, the young woman cried out to the skeletal warrior. She demanded an explanation for his defiance. Her pleas went unheard. He was rapidly closing in on his quarry. Crimson alerts continually materialized before him. They warned that he had provoked the bear's aggression. This, however, was precisely the protagonist's intention. His objective was to lure all the bears towards himself. This strategy had been premeditated. It would ensure the girl's safety. His next course of action was to employ his skills and analyze the creatures. With a ferocious bellow, the bear lashed out with its paw. Its aim was annihilation. Yet, the blow missed its mark. The skeleton had been there mere moments ago. The skeletal figure had evaded the attack flawlessly, without even a glance back. Jiancheng anticipated his adversary's next move. Just as the hero foresaw, the bear lunged to bite him. But with a nimble leap, he evaded the attack effortlessly. As Jiancheng continued to sprint and outmaneuver the enraged bears, unable to seize him, he recognized his current health was precarious. He could only endure a maximum of 2 blows from their claws. Therefore, he had to execute his plan flawlessly, avoiding all damage. Jiancheng persisted in his agile maneuvers, evading the bears' relentless assaults. Frustrated, they collided with each other in their frenzy, each one desperately trying to capture the primary target. Jiancheng maintained his evasive tactics, dodging the bears' furious charges. They lashed out at each other in a blind rage, desperate to reach the intended victim. Those less fortunate were struck by their own brethren. Blinded by fury, they paid no heed to their comrades as they relentlessly pursued their quarry. Jiancheng's remarkable agility stemmed from his skeletal form. His physique was more agile and swift than an average gamer's. This velocity provided a significant edge in the confrontation with the Ursites. Their massive size rendered them quite sluggish. Nevertheless, they possessed a vulnerability. Their weakness resided in their craniums and ankles. In a flash, Jiancheng unleashed his rapid assault ability. This augmented his attack speed by 20%. He thrust his blade directly towards the beast's limb. It elicited a pained bellow from the creature. Relentlessly, he targeted the bear's weak points. Exploiting his swiftness, he severed all its sinews. The vanquished bear could no longer maintain its footing. It collapsed onto the earth. After a brief pause, Jiancheng faced the bears. They were now incapacitated, unable to rise. He advanced towards them. His intent was to strike their vital areas. He sought to end their suffering completely. This method would inflict double the critical damage. This enabled him to eliminate them swiftly. Nevertheless, Fierce claw bears are known as novice slayers for a reason. This reputation stems from their ability to activate a skill. Even a single injury triggers this potential. Their unique ability is the lightning skill. Employed only in dire circumstances, it instantly, completely incapacitates the player. Poised with his blade at the ready, the protagonist awaited the creature's assault. Suddenly, a blinding flash of lightning descended upon him. With their adversaries paralyzed, the bears charged forward to deliver the final blow. This tactic earned them the moniker Rookie Killer. They became infamous for preying on inexperienced players. Observing her skeletal companion under electrical assault, the girl, recognizing his vulnerability, courageously intervened, brandishing her staff. Unfortunately for both of them, much to the astonishment of the ursine assailant, he casually hoisted his blade onto his shoulder. He stood defiantly amidst the cascading bolts of lightning that bombarded him. There was a single element of the onslaught that the bear hadn't anticipated. The paralyzing effect was useless against skeletal structures. Lacking blood and flesh, the skeleton was immune to such incapacitation. Launching himself skyward, blade raised high, Jinshin plunged his sword with ferocious force towards the bear's head. The beast, caught completely off guard, was left vulnerable in the aftermath of its electrical discharge. A momentary lapse in its defenses left it exposed. This brief opening provided ample opportunity to strike a vital area and inflict a devastating blow. The necromancer girl, staff clutched tightly, jaw agape in astonishment, was utterly bewildered by the spectacle. He withdrew his blood-soaked weapon from the creature's carcass. He glanced at the remaining bears. Witnessing their comrade's demise, they growled ferociously at him. He mused that committing the ferocious bear's attack patterns to memory had been a wise choice. Its unique skeletal structure had made it possible long ago. He could defeat it unscathed. Abruptly, the system window displayed a notification of 50 evolution points acquired. An additional 30 experience points were awarded as well. This constituted a handsome reward for Jiancheng. Inspired by the substantial bounty, he resolved to amass more points for future advancements. He could then attempt to confront the concealed boss. Jiancheng proceeded to engage the remaining bears. The girl observed from the periphery. Unexpectedly, a system alert informed her of her attainment of level 4. Overjoyed, she reveled in the possession of such a remarkable skeleton. She also meticulously studied his techniques. His movements appeared remarkably swift and fluid to her. Observing his combat skills, she struggled to articulate the spectacle before her. It was unlike anything she had witnessed previously. It resembled the prowess of a legendary gamer, a renowned player invited to participate in the game's beta testing. That player was Jiancheng. His movements were divine, mirroring her skeleton's agility. The young woman found her own deductions unbelievable. They seemed utterly surreal, beyond the realm of imagination. Unable to reach a definitive answer, she offered a cheerful smile and a suggestion. Perhaps it was a hidden surprise from the game developers, a special tribute to Jiancheng. Meanwhile, in the background, the bear's destiny hung in the balance. Tears streaming down its face, the creature pleaded for mercy. Observing the skeletal figure's increasing composure, she shyly averted her gaze. She chided herself, reminding herself that now wasn't the moment for such thoughts, since she was the one responsible for its materialization. Surveying the combat zone, the young lady observed with glee. An area overflowing with riches and resources. Creeping on hands and knees, she peered inside the bear's maw. The girl deduced, with fortune favoring her, and possessing the ability to conjure such a magnificent beast, she would capitalize on the situation. Resuming her quest for valuables within the bear's carcass, the girl declared her tiny skeletal companion was omnipotent. The future rested solely upon its capabilities. After observing the surviving bears and evaluating his remaining points, the protagonist concluded that attaining the subsequent evolutionary stage was within his grasp. Abruptly, a system notification disrupted his contemplation. It commended his awe-inspiring prowess. Subsequently, beneath Jiancheng's bewildered expression, a communication materialized, announcing the activation of a new evolutionary pathway. Subsequently, a system window displayed 3 distinct options. Each choice required a specific point allocation. This unexpected development greatly astonished the protagonist. He never could have imagined the existence of a concealed evolutionary course, characteristically of a clandestine route. Its cost doubled that of a standard progression. Having resolved to pursue the hidden path, Jiancheng determined he required additional time for point accumulation. Nevertheless, substantial risks frequently yielded substantial benefits. To locate the concealed adversary, however, he must first eliminate all creatures within the vicinity. He then selected the hidden path icon. A notification appeared, confirming the successful selection of the evolution path. Brandishing his sword with unwavering resolve, Jiancheng advanced towards the bears. He vowed to unlock the hidden path without fail. He then faced the bears. He inquired of the bears if they possessed a similar inquisitiveness about the nature of concealed evolution. The sole response was the bears weeping, as they grasped the magnitude of their transgression. From a distance, it was evident that an event of significance was unfolding on ferocious Bear Mountain. Frightened avian flocks ascended anxiously above the arboreal canopy, and the clangor of combat reverberated throughout the vale. One after another, the ferocious bears succumbed to Jiancheng's blade, incapable of inflicting even a superficial wound. His celerity was remarkable. The earth trembled as another bear charged towards our protagonist, fueled by unrestrained rage. Just as it was poised to seize him in its jaws, our skeletal champion vanquished this bear with a single, decisive strike. Neither its brute force nor its ferocity could provide any respite. Jiancheng systematically eradicated these beasts, and with each victory, his power surged. Hundreds of bears perished at his hands, strewn across the battleground. Repeatedly, the system's notification window materialized, informing him that he had acquired 10 evolution points and 10 experience points as well. At last, the seemingly interminable wave of monsters ceased, and our skeletal warrior plunged his blood-soaked blade into the earth, ensuring nothing would disrupt his examination of his attributes and capabilities. Finally, the last adversary, he mused, standing amidst the carnage, and accessed the system's informational displays. His proficiencies increased with each ascended level, yet he sensed his progress was sluggish and insufficiently equipped for the impending peril. With every level attained, the evolution points garnered from slaying monsters dwindled considerably. Therefore, it wasn't altogether unexpected that he lacked 20 evolution points for the subsequent transformation, and this vexed him immensely. Such misfortune to be a mere 20 short. However, something else caught his attention. The spoils he and his partner had acquired from the bears, and surveyed his surroundings. The entire glade was strewn with ursine carcasses. Each one displayed a floating information panel above it, detailing the obtainable resources. A single bear yielded 5 copper pieces and a bear crystal. Having eliminated all the bears, a timer commenced. It signaled the resurgence of a new wave of bears. Haste was of the essence. Disappointment washed over him for not accumulating enough points required for his next advancement. Yet he found solace in successfully dispatching all the bears within the allotted time and at the designated level. He examined the level 5 bear's remains, inspecting its plunder. Abruptly, a notification materialized, cautioning him about the emergence of a concealed boss nearby. An enigmatic gateway manifested. This would represent a substantial setback for Pingchen. Dr. Lu voices her apprehension regarding the perils lurking within the ancient remains. Legends say the elemental entities overcome their adversaries. However, victory without eliminating them is uncertain. Shu, who becomes apprehensive if the Tamar's strength falters. Considering this the worst-case scenario isn't just risky, it's possibly lethal. Lu provides him with a website address and an invitation. A QR code offers price reductions and bonuses on cultivation supplies. She aims to encourage him to utilize the available provisions. She emphasizes that these assets will facilitate his rapid advancement. He'll quickly become an expert tamer, she assures. Lu recommends Shu, who temporarily disregard the Ice Dragon ruins. He should concentrate solely on the uncharted realm. Ironically, she seems to be the one consistently mentioning them. The latest addition to Department 11 begins to perceive the mission as excessively perilous. He conveniently overlooks that it's a component of the evaluation. It determines official membership within the group. His primary objective within the ruins is to unveil Glacier City's hidden past. Lu assures him complete exploration isn't necessary for success. His auditory perception will be instrumental in achieving this goal. This bear was a sovereign, even among the bear kings, and for a justifiable reason. It dwarfed other bears in size. Its body bristled with claws protruding in every direction. Furthermore, it boasted a level of 15. Jiancheng concealed himself behind a tree, observing the colossal creature. He was relieved this minor boss remained passive, at least until a player entered its field of vision. This development benefited our skeletal protagonist. It presented additional tactical advantages. Another pressing concern weighed on his mind. Did the game register him as a player or not? He was ready to draw his blade and test his hypothesis, but a sudden realization halted him. A direct assault was out of the question for Jiancheng. This boss possessed a multitude of troublesome abilities. These skills posed a significant challenge for novice players. Relying solely on agility and expertise and engaging the boss head-on presented a considerable risk of failure. He remained concealed behind the tree trunk. He attempted to recollect the beta test more vividly. In those days, this monarch of the mountain bears had relentlessly pursued him. Now he struggled to recall which ability of this ferocious, claw-wielding bear boss posed the greatest threat. His memory yielded nothing further. He resolved to abandon this fruitless endeavor. He only recalled the boss's skill being particularly challenging. After all, the game boasted a plethora of minor bosses. In the initial stages, memorizing them all proved impossible. Discouraged, Jiancheng retraced his steps. He left the boss undisturbed, aspiring to return upon achieving his next evolutionary milestone. He arrived back at the clearing littered with bear carcasses. The timer displayed 1 hour remaining. 20 minutes remained until the resurgence of new bears. He had no choice but to await the next monster generation. During his vigil, something caught his eye. There was a single sensation he perceived, and it greatly captivated his curiosity. An unseen, energetic filament seemed to link the yogi to the maiden, the one who had called him forth. He pondered if all summoned entities experienced a similar phenomenon. This energetic conduit through the woods, guiding him towards his temporary mistress. The bond felt remarkably potent. Jiancheng resolved to return to her. Traversing the woodland, he contemplated his existence as a summoned being. He'd always sensed a link, binding them both to the young lady. He had to locate her swiftly, just to be safe. Despite the intervening distance, he could almost visualize her, sense her actions. Mental images of her happily gathering spoils from the bears flashed through his consciousness. He arrived at the glade where she was. Her continued presence there barely registered as a surprise. She was still pillaging the remains of the fallen. Suddenly, approaching voices reached his ears. Jiancheng observed from the concealment of the shrubbery. As a band of gamers entered the adjacent glade, one turned to their group's commander. With a self-evident observation, all the creatures had vanished. He inquired if it might be a glitch. Another noticed the precision of their demise. They'd been cleanly dispatched. Their leader, seemingly the most seasoned among them, declared them fools. The creature's absence, he explained, was due to prior extermination. He gestured towards the denuded carcasses strewn about. Collective bewilderment filled them. Who would have the audacity to slay all the beasts? Within the tiger hunting guild's domain? Could it be members of the Brawler Guild, they speculated? One of them, with heightened emotion, proceeded to persuade the others of a rumor he'd caught wind of. The story suggested their guild's second-in-command was alleging that members of the rival Brawlers Guild were encroaching upon their established territory. Furthermore, he claimed the guild master had previously decreed that any encounter with these rivals should be met with. However, their group's leader abruptly cut him short, issuing a death threat should he dare to breathe a word of the incident to the guild master. Terrified, he readily agreed, vowing to maintain absolute silence. With this matter seemingly resolved, the guild master dispatched his men to thoroughly examine the surrounding area. The bears' remains were still present, indicating whoever was responsible. The perpetrator likely remained in the vicinity. He cautioned them, failure to apprehend the culprit, and informed the guild leader would result in severe consequences. They were tasked with locating the individual and the group members, dispersed in various directions to commence their search. One member proceeded along the wooded trail, scanning his surroundings. He pondered silently, observing that their commander solely issued directives. Let him attempt locating someone amidst this dense foliage, he mused. Apprehension gripped him. He dreaded a potential encounter with the bear. Should it still linger nearby, he was certain they would congregate as a pack, swiftly devouring him. Then, he would deeply lament the financial expenditure on his gear. Suddenly, clamorous shouts reached his ears. Fortune favors me. I've struck it rich. The player rushed towards the clearing, where a young woman sat in astonishment, gazing at the uncommon loot dropped by the vanquished creatures. She contemplated the potential profits from their sale. He abruptly yelled in response, summoning his companions. "Over here! It's the gamer! I've located him." The young woman was startled by this sudden shift in events. They inquired about her origins. Her identity and purpose for venturing into their guild's domain were questioned. However, his posse was rapidly converging. Their leader urged composure and inquired about the problem. He reported encountering a suspicious individual. The girl was astonished to discover the presence of other gamers. With a sheepish yet courteous grin, she innocently explained that she was merely searching for her missing skeletal companion. It had escaped, and she was determined to retrieve it. The group's leader was utterly incredulous. He'd never encountered a summoned entity abandoning its master. He could not fathom such an occurrence. He urged her to cease the charade. He demanded she reveal her teammates' whereabouts. He pressed her to disclose their hiding place. The girl, bewildered, inquired about the team. She then clarified she was solo, without a team, accompanied only by her summoned companion. He commanded his teammate, Shadowbird, to engage her in combat and apprehend her, preventing escape or self-harm. Essentially, to force her offline. He readily consented, a sinister grin spreading across his face. He intended to extract her team's location through interrogation. She braced herself for the impending conflict, unaware of their motives or objectives, confused about their intentions. To this, Shadowbird declared his fondness for resilient adversaries. But first, he employed his investigative abilities, discovering the girl's honesty. He revealed her to be a mere 9th-level necromancer. Her skeletal summon possessed sluggish movement and weak attacks. He expressed strong doubts about her ability to defeat even a single bear. Examining the deceased bear's injuries, he noted their clean and precise nature. They appear to be inflicted by a skilled swordsman. He paused, then revealed another significant discovery about the girl. She was clearly not a member of their party. She wouldn't relinquish her spoils, even under threat of violence. They deduced that another individual had cleared the area. She was merely a scavenger. She'd stumbled into the bear's domain by chance. A quick note. In this game, looters are inexperienced players who trail successful teams, collecting any leftover treasure. They're also known as gold diggers. Often, they profit by selling in-game items. They peddle virtual goods for real-world currency. These include uncommon cosmetic items, valuable loot, and resources. Their leader then declared, "All right, she's all yours." His underlings expressed their gratitude with crude laughter. He, however, claimed the remaining 3. He proceeded to seek out the group that had conquered the area, and those compelled to retreat were deeply disappointed to have missed out on such amusement. Shadowbird, with a chuckle, prepared to commence his game. He swiftly encircled her, warning that any attempt to flee would result in her demise. Terror seized the girl, causing her to tremble. He inquired if she was aware of the most authentic aspect of the Great Wasteland. The frightened girl silently yearned for her small skeletal companion's presence. The villain provided his own answer. It was the sensation of touch. An unfathomable horror lurked behind him, one beyond his current comprehension. Jian Chung placed his skeletal hand upon the villain's shoulder, startling him into a swift turn. Suddenly, a shriek pierced the silence of the glade. The startled band of rogues spun around in disbelief. Impossible! How could this be happening? How did the skeletal warrior manage to surprise Shadowbird? The young woman, tears welling in her eyes, celebrated the reappearance of her skeletal guardian. She insisted she had maintained the charade as long as possible, but she could no longer keep up the pretense. Shadowbird's cries of agony filled the air. Now armless, his companions rushed to his aid. They were baffled by the turn of events. Jiancheng swiftly hoisted the girl onto his shoulder and sprinted away with her. Glancing back, the disarmed villain started to grasp who had slain all those bears. It appeared the necromancer's summoned creature was responsible. The group's leader was enraged. He cursed their gullibility, having been so easily deceived by the girl. His bewildered subordinates inquired about their next course of action. What a humiliating defeat they had suffered. With her successful escape, they lacked any leverage against the guild leader. The commander bellowed, "Pursue them." Once more, terrified avian creatures soared above the unsettled woodland. He persistently urged them to flee, following the path the escapees had taken. In the meantime, our protagonist sprinted with maximum effort, the girl secured on his back. She was overjoyed by his return. having abandoned hope of seeing him again. Suddenly, the antagonist's chief charged directly towards them, attempting to halt their progress with menacing words. The girl offered to disembark, believing she could run and aid him in combat. She wanted to assist in the confrontation. Lacking vocal cords, the skeletal figure couldn't verbally respond, but he persisted in carrying her. He simply gazed at her, as if to communicate, receiving no audible reply. She pondered the possibility that this explained his reluctance to abandon her. A bashful grin spread across her face as she pondered. Perhaps, she mused, he harbored some affection for her. Despite his diminutive skeletal frame, he possessed a certain charm from afar. Yet, the reality remained. He was still a skeleton. Before her romantic reverie could conclude, the skeleton abruptly deposited her into the closest shrubbery. And then, he vanished. Words failed her as she struggled to comprehend. Why would he treat her so callously? Were it not for the foliage obstructing her speech, her outburst would have undoubtedly drawn unwanted notice. Fortune smiled upon her. Her pursuers, oblivious to her presence in the undergrowth, raced past, their attention fixated solely on the skeletal figure. Clarity dawned upon her. His actions were for her protection. He intended to lure their pursuers away, ensuring her safety. Our protagonist recognized the inevitability of confrontation. Escape without a fight was impossible. He pivoted, his gaze sweeping over his adversaries, swiftly evaluating their strengths. Their ranks included a specialist in hand-to-hand combat. His role was to press the attack. A seasoned fighter was deployed to reconnoiter and harass the opposition. This squad was explicitly assembled for the express purpose of eliminating other players. Their objective: plunder the fallen. Fortunately, the prior assault had incapacitated their archer. Judging from his demeanor, this coward possessed a fragile psyche. Our protagonist assessed his odds of victory as favorable. He reversed course and charged towards the adversaries. As he halted before them, they finally registered the girl's absence. However, it was of little consequence. The skeletal figure's presence signified her proximity. Their leader continued his tirade, incredulous at being duped by the girl once more. He never anticipated her ability to command her summoned entity, navigate with ease. He cautioned his squad to remain vigilant of their environment. She was likely concealed nearby. He remained incredulous that she had vanquished so many creatures in such a brief time frame, single-handedly. His primary question was her motivation. Was she attempting to advance her level, or simply acquiring resources? He sensed something amiss. An eerie glow emanated from the portal behind the skeletal figure. This area of the forest unsettled the team leader. He believed they should gather more information before engaging. The leader beckoned the archer. He instructed him to utilize his abilities to scout and assess the vicinity. But the archer was unresponsive, seemingly in a trance. In the ensuing moment, he discarded his arrow quiver, and with the exclamation, "How dare you summon me?" severed his own arm. He prepared to hurl poison blades at the skeletal being. The skeleton remained motionless before them. The archer, enraged, vowed to obliterate the skeletal figure. His squad, recognizing the peril of the snare, failed to pacify his wrath. A chilling grin spread across the skeleton's face, as if deriding them. Jian Chung braced himself, ready to thwart any impending assault. He patiently awaited the inevitable onslaught. Unable to tolerate such audacity, Shadow Bird unleashed his venomous projectiles. He hurled his poison daggers with unrestrained fury. This was precisely the anticipated reaction. With a single, deft sweep of his blade, he effortlessly parried the attack. They had unwittingly stumbled into his meticulously laid trap. The archer's subsequent assault yielded a similar outcome. Observing his passive defense, the others began to doubt the presence of an ambush. They reasoned that there was no hidden danger. Under these circumstances, a preemptive strike to eliminate the summoned entity seemed prudent. With a collective battle cry, they charged forward in unison. Their leader, brandishing a colossal hammer, prepared to deliver the initial blow. He commanded the annihilation of the skeleton before commencing the search for the girl. Meanwhile, our protagonist pondered the boss's inexplicable inaction. He narrowly avoided the devastating blow, It possessed significant force but lacked speed. The adversary observed the skeleton's remarkable agility. Its swiftness was exceptional for a low-level skeleton, typically known for sluggish reflexes. Abruptly, the archer's projectiles struck the gateway. Instantly, a notification materialized before the entire group. They had been detected by the concealed overlord of Ferocious, Bear Mountain, the undisputed sovereign of that domain. Astonishment gripped the entire team. How was this possible? What in the world was happening? They struggled to comprehend the unfolding events. This marked their initial encounter with this entity. What manner of clandestine adversary was this? Meanwhile, it advanced toward them relentlessly. In a flash, it launched an aerial assault. The remaining team members remained oblivious to its identity. Only their commander recognized the formidable foe. It was the very being their guild's second-in-command sought. Yet, the reason for the boss's aggression remained a mystery. Overwhelmed by panic, he urged his comrades to disperse and evade the impending strike. Impending impact zone. They narrowly avoided the blow. The behemoth slammed into the earth with tremendous power. Like a falling star, it scattered debris everywhere. Dirt and rubble filled the air. It appeared everyone had successfully evaded the attack. However, the injured Shadow Bird was too slow. It was unable to respond in time. A game over message flashed across the screen, signaling the player's demise. The party's commander remained baffled by the boss's unexpected arrival. He pondered if the young woman was its intended prey. Had it been lurking there all along? The monstrous foe offered little time for contemplation. It unleashed its berserk roar ability that alone sent the entire group fleeing in terror. They ran for their lives, crying out in desperation. One member lingered slightly too long. Suddenly, they all became immobile, rising into the air. They were inexplicably airborne, and the nature of its gravitational manipulation. It was revealed to be yet another boss ability. Sandstorm Domain initially levitated adversaries, suspending them in midair. Subsequently, it completely restricted their movement. The unlucky individual in closest proximity to the bear succumbed to panic, realizing his entrapment. The group's leader, similarly incapacitated, instructed him to deploy his shield and brace for the impending impact. Jianqing observed the unfolding events with detached composure. He had already committed to memory the boss's two primary capabilities. These were Berserker Roar and Sandstorm Domain. Both presented formidable challenges, particularly for novice combatants. Meanwhile, the bear effortlessly breached the unfortunate man's defenses. His shield was discarded, flung away with ease. The bear then seized him in its jaws, as his companions looked on in terror. The protagonist was aware of the limited duration of the boss's initial skills. He intended to observe their resilience against his own abilities. A wave of anger and frustration washed over the leader. He suspected that girl had outwitted them once more. She grasped the boss's true nature and intentionally enticed them into this trap, employing her skeletal remains as a lure. Immobilized by fear, he couldn't flee. As the bear lumbered towards him, glancing sideways, he spotted the skeletal form. He pondered if the girl lingered, observing their demise, witnessing their final moments. Having abandoned all hope of survival, the boss's ability abruptly ceased. He recognized his opportunity for escape. Only two remained. They desperately sprinted from the monstrous bear. They suffered immense losses due to this formidable foe. Previously, he believed his isolation was permanent. A hasty retreat was necessary. They had to inform their guild master. They had located the concealed boss. Suddenly, a fleeting silhouette darted past them in the undergrowth. The commander questioned the skeletal warrior's whereabouts. Their lapse in attention proved fatal. In a fleeting instant, a blade swiftly severed both their heads. The attack was too rapid for any reaction. Dual notification windows materialized, displaying the stark message, player deceased. The commander was incredulous, struggling to process the events. To be eliminated by a mere conjuration seemed impossible. Rage consumed him, yet he was powerless to act. His gaze fixed upon the skeletal figure, and he resolved to report the incident. Both the girl responsible for the summoning and the concealed adversary would be exposed. Their guild leader must be informed of these transgressions. Retribution would be swift and merciless. They would be pursued and eliminated for their audacious defiance. The villainous contingent was vanquished, but the clandestine antagonist remained. splintering trees in its wake. It rapidly advanced toward our protagonist, who stood with his back turned, patiently awaiting its arrival. A notification window materialized before him that he'd acquired 20 evolution points. Then, the subsequent notification materialized. It confirmed he'd successfully obtained the necessary amount of evolution points. The prompt asked, "Evolve now?" Mere moments before the bear's massive jaws engulfed him, he selected yes. Instantly, upon confirming, a bolt of azure lightning coursed through him. The force was so immense, it sent nearby stones scattering. Post-evolution, Tiancheng possessed the power to halt the behemoth's advance. He prevented the bear's maw from consuming him. A notification window materialized, displaying information. It stated he had 3 seconds of defensive reinforcement remaining. Following his transformation, he was prepared to confront the boss. The countdown commenced. A new window emerged. It declared his evolution into a rank 3 skeleton. His role was now a melee combatant. He also acquired a new skill. A bone armor arrow, launched by the combat striker, transformed into an arm guard. The defensive period has now elapsed. Simultaneously, he leaped into the air, delivering a cross slash against the bear's paw. He evaded the bear's onslaught, countering with 2 swift strikes. His quick draw technique has ascended to the 2nd tier. Attack velocity is amplified by 40%. Jian Cheng was immensely satisfied with this enhanced speed. He retreated slightly, both to evaluate his adversary and secure maneuvering space. The formidable hidden boss, the monarch of Bear Mountain, possessed a monstrous bear-like physique. Thus, its vulnerabilities remained its tendons and neck. The skeletal warrior was primed for combat. Enveloped in a violet aura, resembling a Susanoo, he telepathically addressed the boss. "Come, let me gauge your might and prowess." The boss seemingly comprehended his intent. For its crimson eye narrowed menacingly. With tremendous force, it charged towards the skeleton, sending it hurtling backward with a single swipe of its paw. Jian Cheng had to acknowledge his swift aerial velocity. Despite undergoing an evolution, he recognized he lacked the resilience to endure direct assaults. Fortunately, however, his recently acquired combat striker's bone armor arrow, in its arm guard configuration, presented him with fresh tactical options. This newfound ability empowered him to engage adversaries from a distance. Utilizing bone projectiles, an advantage he readily exploited. He launched a volley of arrows towards the creature's face, targeting the vicinity of its eye, eliciting a pained roar from the beast. Jian Cheng executed a dramatic landing, regaining his footing, shaking off the impact of the bear's strike. He prepared to renew his offensive, but an emergent notification window compelled him to halt. It cautioned that the Bear Mountain Sovereign was on the verge of unleashing his Sandstorm domain ability. Jian Cheng felt a surge of irritation at the reappearance of this particular skill. Our protagonist understood that within the boss's gravitational field's influence, all were drawn inexorably towards the boss, escape proving futile. Consequently, his tactical options were now somewhat constrained. Once the ability dissipated, the bear would undoubtedly retaliate. He needed to devise a strategy. He formulated a plan specifically for this encounter. He once again summoned his bone arrows. Despite his inability to aim accurately, precision was inconsequential. The pervasive gravitational magic within a wide radius ensured every projectile was guided towards its intended destination. Compelled by this potent force, his arrows were guaranteed to strike true. Instead of opposing the gravitational pull, he accelerated towards it, gaining momentum while concealed from the bear's view. He deftly maneuvered beneath its massive form. Harnessing the gravitational field and its inherent force, he amplified his impending strike. He prepared to assault the creature's vulnerable underbelly. With lightning speed, he darted beneath the bear, slashing its stomach. His attack threatened to disembowel the beast. However, the formidable creature persisted. It unleashed its ability once more. Prostrate within the sandstorm's domain, he lay vulnerable. The technique's potency was amplified this time. It ripped through nearby trees and tore chunks from the earth. Xian Cheng observed the heightened intensity of the gravitational pull. This signaled the bear's final, desperate attempt at victory. However, there was a further complication. Our skeletal warrior had depleted nearly all its bone projectiles. A direct confrontation was unavoidable. Launching himself from a landmass, he soared towards the bear. He resolved to conclude the battle immediately. He charged headlong into the monster's gaping maw. Jaws poised to snap, shut eternally awaited him. Jiancheng loosed his final arrows, diverting the boss's attention. This preceded his primary assault. The projectiles found their mark on the beast's face once more. A pained roar erupted from the creature. With a mighty heave, he plunged his blade. It pierced the creature's sole remaining eye. Agony racked the beast, regained his footing, and repelled the skeletal remains. The gravitational pull had just dissipated. Our protagonist could move unhindered once more. He observed the adversary, currently blinded, and felt certain of its impending demise. Jiancheng held immense gratitude for his newfound ability. It was proving to be incredibly advantageous. New bone projectiles gradually began to regenerate. However, complete and swift restoration required bone fragments. His contemplation was interrupted by the boss's voice. "Player, I have long awaited your arrival." This unexpected development astonished the hero. Since when did bosses possess the power of speech? The voice resumed. Jiancheng sensed something amiss. Early game bosses weren't meant to engage in dialogue with players. What was happening? The Ursine creature continued. "Allow me to bestow upon you the final gift of the ferocious bear." From the formidable slopes of the mountain, azure bolts of electrical energy crackled forth, emanating from the gem embedded in his brow. A soudaine inscription matérialise a foreboding message. The monarch of Bear Mountain prepares to unleash his ultimate ability. 1,000 thunderous strikes will descend. Exercise extreme caution and evade its wrath. Jiancheng was rendered speechless by this unexpected development. Why did the official game launch incorporate narration for the new power? The formidable adversary was concluding his preparations, poised to execute his ultimate technique. The skeletal figure pondered. Why was this mundane game burdened with such superfluous additions? However, given the extraordinary nature of this ability, he would abandon caution and courtesy, swiftly concluding the encounter. His confidence surged, for as a skeletal being, he possessed immunity to electrical assaults. Then, a potent cerulean thunderbolt struck him. The entire forest was bathed in an azure radiance. In the meantime, the young woman, anxious about her skeletal companion, rushed to his aid. She was burdened by an abundance of crystals, gathered from the fallen bears. Consequently, her velocity was diminished by 40%. Nevertheless, she hastened with all possible speed, fearing harm had befallen him. His prolonged absence fueled her apprehension. She remained grateful he diverted those other players. Gradually, she discarded the crystals and sprinted towards the sounds of combat. The girl was certain only she possessed the power to rescue him. Suddenly, an object descended rapidly from overhead. She gazed upward in astonishment. It was the severed head of the vanquished boss, the monarch of Bear Mountain. Stunned, she was momentarily paralyzed. The head plummeted directly onto her, generating a cloud of dust upon impact. Notification windows materialized, declaring her the first to vanquish the concealed boss of the bear. Peak Mountain has been conquered. By the gamer. Simply an adorable goofball, she ascended to level 10. The game directed her to the central hub to select a specialization. Behold the current status report of our skeletal companion. He and his master both achieved level 10, substantially boosting their attributes. It lacked the crimson stain of a cross. A skeletal figure, missing a limb, dragged itself across the barren wasteland. The desolate landscape was littered with skulls and bone fragments. Some remains even dangled from the branches of withered trees. Its fractured bones emitted a grating, creaking sound with each movement. Yet, it persisted in its arduous journey. He was known as Jiancheng. In his former life, he was a skilled video game player. Now, however, he existed as nothing more than a skeletal husk. Extending his solitary arm, he shakily attempted to grasp the bone sword. It lay impaled in the earth before him. Even in this state, comprehension eluded him. His thoughts, it seemed, were not fated to cease. Suddenly, an enormous, crimson-clawed paw descended upon his dilapidated form. The protagonist recoiled in terror. A sickening crunch emanated from his neck. He desperately craned his head to ascertain his fate. The reality proved to be far from ideal. A massive crimson canine towered over him. Its eyes burned with a scarlet intensity. Crouching low, feigning demise, Jiancheng pondered his unfortunate predicament. Why was this adversity befalling him? In 2025, Wasteland's open beta commenced. Its lifelike gameplay within an expansive virtual world drove countless gamers into a passionate frenzy. Steel and sorcery captivated the imaginations and fueled the fantasies of people worldwide. It was the vast wasteland that transformed these human aspirations into tangible experiences. This game boasted countless tasks and a multitude of endeavors. It offered refuge for numerous online players teetering on the brink, allowing them to remain within their digital reveries. The game's immense popularity resulted in a surge of commissions for the development studio responsible. Consequently, the ranks of beta testers swelled, aspired to be the first to conquer the virtual world. The developers were compelled to work relentlessly to meet player demand and expedite the game's testing phase. Among the beta testers selected was our central character. However, events unfolded quite unexpectedly. Nearly 3 weeks prior to the game's release, Jin Chung labored for nearly 42 hours straight, completing a massive series of tasks. This extreme exertion had detrimental and lasting effects. Observing Jin Cheng's dazed state, slumped in his gaming chair, he abruptly grasped his chest. The company staff instantly raised the alarm and summoned assistance. They frantically reported that he appeared on the verge of death. The employees erupted in a frenzy of shouts, demanding an immediate equipment check. They needed to disconnect him. If he expired within the game, the equipment would be irretrievable. Thus, our hero met his demise. Abruptly, Jiancheng perceived a frantic voice calling his name. The voice desperately inquired about his condition and his immobility. Upon opening his eyes, he beheld the visage of a young woman. With an enthusiastic tone, she attempted to rouse him, urging him to move. She declared that his inaction would result in her immediate demise. As he regained consciousness, he observed the source of the voice. It belonged to a maiden with golden locks and a striking physique. Her garments were severely tattered. Clutching a bone staff, she gazed at the protagonist with a mixture of trepidation and anticipation in her eyes. He had transformed into a skeletal figure. Bewildered, he scratched his skull. He struggled to comprehend the unfolding events. Observing the skeleton's revival, the girl was overcome with joy. However, he disregarded the unfamiliar girl's remarks. His focus was captivated by something far more intriguing. Despite the girl's frantic cries, questioning his sudden immobility, his gaze fixated on the bone ornament adorning her neck. Astonishment and fascination filled his eyes. Could this be the hereafter? The protagonist pondered. A thunderous detonation shattered his contemplation. The earth behind Jian Sheng and the girl trembled. Skeletal fragments shifted and rattled. Drawn by the commotion, they swiftly turned to ascertain the cause. The sight that greeted them was utterly horrifying. A colossal, crimson, undead wolf of elite status loomed before them. It clutched skeletal remains in its jaws, its gaze menacing. Recovering from the initial shock, the girl urgently implored Jian Chung to intervene. She pleaded with him to halt the creature, but he disregarded her pleas, his attention riveted on the formidable beast. Could this grim wolf be, he mused internally, the one rumored to inhabit the starting village of the vast wasteland? Upon grasping this, the realization dawned on him. I understand now. This isn't the hereafter, he deduced. It became apparent that this was the initial settlement of the vast barren lands, a desolate expanse of mortality and decay. The central character was reborn into the game's universe. His demise led to a mysterious reincarnation. Observing the skeletal figure's indifference to the beast, the young woman fearfully inquired why he merely observed. She cautioned that inaction would result in their mutual demise. Glancing back at the girl, Jianqing pondered her identity and audacity to command him. The undead wolf didn't afford them time to address the predicament. It instantly charged towards Jiansheng and the girl, rapidly closing the distance with powerful leaps. Witnessing this, the girl exclaimed in terror, alerting him to the creature's imminent approach. The massive crimson wolf gaped its maw, targeting the boy, aiming for a swift end. However, for Jian Chung, a seasoned gamer, and had already vanquished a multitude of them during the game's closed beta trial period, he knew its vulnerability lay in its neck. This adversary posed no significant challenge. Brandishing his sword and assuming a combat stance, he braced himself. Preemptively targeting the creature's weak point, he readied his attack. The opportune moment to strike presented itself. The wolf's attack missed its mark. Meanwhile, The protagonist, through a stroke of luck, successfully neutralized the foe, or so it seemed initially. In the ensuing moment, Jian Cheng was bewildered. He realized his striking hand had vanished. The monster's massive, clawed paw swiftly struck him. He was launched skyward, unaware of the source of his sudden weakness. He crashed to the earth, repeatedly impacting the ground. He tumbled across the ground, prostrate on the earth, covered in dirt, with several fractured bones and a shattered jaw. A sudden realization dawned upon our hero. It finally hit me. I've been reborn as a lowly, skeletal warrior. His internal monologue was spot on. His form had been conjured by an inexperienced necromancer. Following his rebirth, grounded and extending his solitary hand, he attempted to grasp his bone blade. Alas, he was incapable of doing so. The beast's massive paw crushed his already feeble frame, immobilizing the frail skeleton. Helpless and pinned beneath a colossal zombie wolf, capable of obliterating him at any instant. Jian Cheng pondered how this had come to pass. Could this truly be the end? In his former existence, he was an expert, a two-time champion in his younger days. He left an extraordinary legacy in the realm of competitive gaming. Back then, he considered himself a global champion. But a vehicular collision drastically altered his trajectory. The impact of the crash permanently impaired his hands. This resulted in a substantial reduction in dexterity. Consequently, his professional gaming career met its end. However, this was merely one piece of the puzzle. Massive medical expenses and a broken bailout agreement added to his woes. He was ultimately forced to swallow his pride. He became a game beta tester out of necessity, unwilling to accept his circumstances. He perished in squalor. In his final moments, he could hear the company's staff conversing. They didn't even consider summoning medical assistance. They immediately declared him deceased. To his astonishment, nobody mourned his passing. He was met with utter indifference. The employees were preoccupied with the contents of his in-game inventory. They had invested considerable resources into these virtual possessions. These items would vanish without a trace upon his death. Some pondered whether contacting his next of kin was even necessary, perhaps to seek restitution for their loss. Aware of his past victories, some believe he likely met his end without any lingering regrets, a sentiment his peers readily echoed. But Jian Cheng, whose life force hadn't been fully extinguished, wouldn't surrender so easily. Extending his arm, he roared for everyone to retreat. No regrets? I'm filled with goddamn regrets. I refuse to accept such a fate. Reaching out a hand, its flesh vaporized by the intense light, Jian Cheng seethed in defiance. If only the heavens would grant me another opportunity, he cried out, lunging towards the light at the tunnel's end. It was his sole beacon of hope, his only chance at redemption. All flesh had been completely eradicated from his form, leaving behind only bare bone. I swear, I shall seize control of my destiny. Jian Cheng roared in a frenzy. His eyes then blazed with violet electricity. With resolute determination, he extended his hand towards his blade. Consequently, he succeeded, gripping the sword firmly in his hand. Lightning crackled and danced around the weapon. Abruptly, system alerts bombarded him. The system had identified a potent survival instinct. This triggered the awakening of the divine evolutionary system. More electrical discharges enveloped the protagonist, who remained prostrate on the earth. Allegedly, this system's function was to facilitate its users' limitless evolution. They would ascend to the apex, achieving ultimate supremacy in this realm. Subsequently, the system announced the activation of a unique reward package. This was triggered by the user's imminent demise. An even more intense lightning surged within Jian Cheng's skeletal frame. The massive canine observed the scene unfold. It emitted a furious snarl, sensing imminent danger. In a flash, the system announced the user's complete health regeneration. A moment later, the wolf's head was severed from its torso. Jian Cheng's blade cleaved it in a single, swift stroke. Revived, he resolved to fight for survival. Crimson fluid sprayed in all directions. But the observing girl remained oblivious, completely stunned by the spectacle. The creature's inanimate head rested inertly upon the earth. Upon the vanquished beast's carcass, bathed in ethereal light, stood a solitary skeletal figure. Despite its current stature, it resembled a true hero. Yet, this was merely a facade. Standing amidst the downpour, he grasped the urgency of the situation. The temporary enhancement bestowed by the system dissipated immediately after the blow. Following this, the system indicated a victory over a level 3 undead canine. The reward: 10 experience points, and 10 development points. But for Jian Cheng, this was currently inconsequential. Standing amidst the downpour, arms outstretched towards the heavens, he felt the profound relief of survival. That was ample for him. Tightening his skeletal hand, the protagonist observed with contentment. This form isn't as deficient as I presumed. Meanwhile, perched upon her familiar's knee, the sorceress was astonished that her feeble, congregated skeletal warrior had vanquished such a formidable beast. Subsequently, the system's notification panel revealed the central figure's attributes. He was presently level 1 of the deceased lineage. His vitality was 100, while his arcane energy was non-existent. His offensive capacity was a mere 2, but when wielding a blade, it registered a value of 5. The sole armament was a novice's bone blade. Strength attributes reached a maximum of 100. Meanwhile, developmental attributes were merely 10 out of a potential 100. Abilities were non-existent. The user, as characterized by her system, was an endearingly naive level 1 novice. Finally, a notification window materialized beneath the statistics. It indicated that advancement necessitated an additional 90 developmental points. It then recommended promptly acquiring more developmental points. The Great Wasteland was an expansive, open-world game. Its aesthetic was strikingly lifelike. Furthermore, it boasted intricately designed gameplay mechanics. From combat intricacies to creature behaviors, all were governed by sophisticated artificial intelligence. Even the object destruction physics were remarkably realistic. There was also the potential for player summons to undergo transformations. Nevertheless, such occurrences were exceptionally infrequent and unpredictable. More accurately, the likelihood of such an event was a mere 1 in a million. The transformation of their summoned creatures led to a period of exponential advancement. Player levels surged dramatically. Conquering foes far surpassing their own capabilities was now a tangible reality. Observing a holographic display showcasing her surroundings, the screen revealed the unfolding events. The girl gasped in astonishment. Gazing upon the numerous holographic windows, she recognized her fortunate circumstances. Simultaneously, the blade impaled the skull of another undead wolf. It perished before it could react. It became evident the girl's summoned companion had undergone a metamorphosis. Once more, Jian Cheng stood triumphantly atop his vanquished foe. He grasped his weapon, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. The scene exuded a majestic aura. His victory yielded a trophy, a canine tooth from the fallen wolf, potentially for augmentation or fusion with another object. Surveying the spoils from the vanquished wolves, the young woman was astonished by the sheer volume of gear and resources. The bounty translated to a considerable sum. Abruptly, the severed head of a crimson wolf hurtled towards her. This startled the girl, catching her completely off guard. Regaining her composure and reaching for the wolf's head, she confessed that it frightened her immensely. She thought she was about to be ambushed by the creatures. The girl was also taken aback by her summoned entity's prowess. It appeared rather frail, yet swiftly dispatched another wolf. It made her question the established hierarchy between them. Examining her character sheet in the system interface, she was bewildered to discover that, despite her summoned being's transformation, she remained at level 1, a peculiar anomaly. Although she hadn't gained a level, the outcome remained astonishing. Meanwhile, our protagonist continued his struggle against yet another wolf. He adjusted remarkably well to his new form during combat, despite being reduced to a mere skeletal frame. Decapitating the next wolf, Jian Cheng realized the zombie wolves in the new apiary posed no real challenge. They were no longer a menace to him. Reviewing the system notifications, he saw he had progressed several more tiers. Jian Cheng contemplated his survival strategy in this realm. What were the keys to his continued existence? The thought of being trapped in a live game had never crossed his mind. A game recently made available to the public, launched just a short time ago, the necromancer responsible for Jian Cheng's summoning settled beside a deceased wolf's head. She excitedly gushed about the plentiful resources and the immense wealth they would bring. Recalling the girl, the protagonist mused. She who had summoned him was likely an average player, a regular participant in the game. The absence of vocal cords hindered their communication. Yet, what astonished our protagonist most was the existence of a self-proclaimed system, a divine apparatus for advancement. After deciphering his system prompt, revealing that evolutionary progress was achieved by vanquishing creatures and other participants, He learned these points could unlock higher levels of development. An added perk, eliminating formidable bosses, granted the player potent strength enhancements. Due to insufficient accumulated points, activation remained inaccessible. Jian Chung deduced that limitless progression was plausible, provided he continued to defeat monsters or players. The nature of these power enhancements, acquired solely from boss victories, remained enigmatic. These boss-exclusive rewards were completely unknown to him. Despite his involvement in the trial period, Jian Chung had never encountered the concept of power points. Augmenting weaponry. This revelation was intriguing. A summoned being possessing a system was remarkable. Its capacity for autonomous evolution was even more astonishing. This revelation was utterly astounding. For someone reborn as a skeletal warrior, however, it presented a monumental opportunity. What will I become upon evolving? Mused the protagonist, impaling his blade into the earth. Abruptly, a system interface materialized behind him. It declared he had satisfied all prerequisites for advancement. He had significantly surpassed the required evolution points. He possessed 110 out of a necessary 100. He also commanded 100 strength points. Jian Chung was elated. This was his inaugural transformation. The system, however, inquired if he wished to expend 100 evolution points to metamorphose into a swordsman skeleton. Contemplating the selection window, Jian Chung discerned he lacked alternatives. Without hesitation, he activated the confirmation prompt. He resolved to discover the extent of the system's transformative power. A lowly summoning skeleton? Upon consenting to utilize the evolutionary points, the system notified him that the transformation was commencing, and instantly, a fiery eruption burst forth from the system interface, engulfing the protagonist, creating an immense inferno around him. The moment he was consumed by the blaze, the system declared his metamorphosis was underway, granting him 3 seconds of invulnerability. Subsequently, notifications materialized before him, indicating an 80% augmentation to both his health and mana capacity, followed by a proclamation that all his attributes had surged by 80%. Furthermore, he acquired a skeletal swordsman armament, forged from bone steel. The inferno started to recede, revealing a magnificent Jian Chung, brandishing a sword, wreathed in residual flames. A truly impressive sight. Upon the culmination of the transformation, the system proclaimed Jian Cheng's ascension to rank 2. The skeletal swordsman observed his status displayed on the system interface. A wave of pleasant astonishment washed over him. He hadn't anticipated his initial transformation would unlock such a plethora of attributes. Beyond the newfound attributes, Jian Chung acquired a passive ability known as Rapid Toss. This ability amplified his swordsmanship proficiency and augmented his attack velocity by 20%. This compensated for his inherent skeletal fragility. He resolved to evaluate both the novel skill and the weapon. Brandishing the sword, he found it a perfect fit. With a new blade in hand, even without utilizing abilities, his combat prowess surged dramatically. He likely surpassed other players by a significant margin. Scanning his surroundings for his summoner, Jian Chung decided to conceal his sentience. Revealing self-awareness would paint him as a liability regardless of his actions. However, he knew the reality would surface eventually. The truth would inevitably come to light. Only one solution presented itself in this predicament. He needed to rapidly ascend in power. Unlike the globally ranked and guild-affiliated competitors, he had to achieve a level of strength sufficient to stand alone. He must withstand at least 100 adversaries single-handedly. I must surpass them all. Jian Chung concluded with unwavering resolve. A system alert disrupted the protagonist's contemplation. It stressed the urgency of acquiring evolution points. Jian Chung reluctantly accepted his fate. He'd have to grind for evolutionary points. Monster hunting was in his immediate future. Observing the wolves' remains, he recognized the futility of pursuing them. They no longer provided evolution points. He opted to hunt elsewhere on the map. The system relentlessly sent notifications. It urged him to accumulate points. Prior to this, however, Jian Chung needed to address a crucial matter, specifically the strength of his connection to the summoner who had called him forth. Following his rebirth, Jian Chung pivoted and observed the young woman. She remained perched upon the wolf's back, and continued enthusiastically amassing various resources. He pondered, is she a suitable companion for this journey? He contemplated whether she was the appropriate choice to accompany him. He advanced toward the girl, who began describing a location. It possessed a system for bartering items for currency. The exchange rate there was exceptionally favorable. She added that the game's recent release presented a prime opportunity for substantial financial gain. He drew near the girl, who was visibly startled by his abrupt presence. Yet instantly, she discerned a subtle change in his appearance. Jiancheng immediately recognized her as a novice player, finally ceasing her gathering and rising to her feet. The girl reacted with astonishment. An elation upon noticing his sword's level had also ascended. With a triumphant tone, she announced its color-changing ability, indicated it was a mutated familiar. She then rushed towards Jiancheng, embracing him warmly. Exuberantly, she expressed her reliance on him. She instructed him to await her return after gathering the necessary components. They would wait for the wolves' regeneration, then eliminate them once more. This would allow them to acquire the resources anew. She wistfully envisioned immense wealth accumulating overnight. However, the young man was thoroughly displeased with this scheme. He resolved to establish communication. The girl wasn't oblivious and instantly discerned the skeleton's intentions. Jin Cheng gestured again, but indicated an alternate direction. The girl inquired, wondering if he was suggesting a different destination.